The most quoted book in self-improvement was never written for you. It was never written for anyone. Marcus Aurelius wrote it at night, in a tent, on the Danube frontier, in the middle of a war that lasted the rest of his life. No title, no audience. He gave it no name. The Greek heading that survives translates roughly as "to himself." And that changes what every line in it means. You have been reading it as instruction. It was confession. 7 lines you have seen 100 times, and once you see what each one actually was, the 6th will explain why the book is repetitive, and why that repetition is the most useful thing in it. One thing before we begin. Do not listen to this as history. Listen as though you are reading another man's private notebook, because that is exactly what it is, and he would almost certainly not have let you. The value is not in the wisdom. It is in the fact that a man with absolute power was still losing the same arguments with himself at 50. Number 1. The line everyone knows. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Read it as advice, and it is a slogan. Read it as a note to yourself, and it becomes something else entirely. A man reminding himself of something he had failed to do that day. You do not write that sentence when you are calm. You write it after losing your temper with an official or lying awake over a report from the frontier, at the end of a day where your mind was demonstrably not yours. Nobody writes down what they already do. You write down what you keep failing at. That is the reading key for the entire book, and it applies to every line after this one. Each piece of wisdom in the meditations is a record of a failure that happened earlier the same day, which is why the next one is more useful than it looks. Number 2. Book 2 opens with him preparing for the day. When you wake, tell yourself that the people you deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, and dishonest. Now consider who is writing this. The Emperor of Rome. The most powerful man alive, who could have had any of those people removed from a room or from the world. And he is doing what you do, bracing himself before work because certain colleagues get under his skin and he knows it. He was not above being irritated by people. He was just honest about needing to prepare for it. This is the passage that makes the book usable, not because it teaches a technique, but because it tells you that the man everyone quotes needed a pre-brief before dealing with his own staff. And the next line tells you what he actually did with that irritation. Number 3. The best revenge, he writes, is to be unlike the man who did the injury. Notice the word he chose. Not forgiveness, not detachment. Revenge. Because that is what he was actually feeling. And he was not going to write down a nobler word than the true one. That is a man who wanted to hit back and was talking himself out of it on paper, in real time, and leaving in the evidence of what he wanted to do. He did not write "forgive them." He wrote a redirection for a man who was angry, which is precisely why it works. Advice written by someone who feels nothing is useless to a man who feels everything. This was written by a man who felt it and needed the sentence anyway. But there is one thing in the book he needed more often than any of this. Quick one. If you have ever written something down and then failed to do it the same week, type "notebook" in the comments, just so you can see how normal this is. Number 4. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. He returns to death constantly. Dozens of times, across 12 books, in different words, year after year. And there is a reason he had to. He buried most of his children. Of the 14 recorded, only a handful outlived him. He was writing this while plague moved through the empire and while he was ill himself. So it was not philosophical decoration. It was a man using the only leverage he had left to stop wasting the time he was still holding. He was not reminding himself that death exists. He was using it to make trivial things stop mattering by lunchtime, and that leverage is available to you at exactly the same price. Now the one nobody quotes, because it is embarrassing. Number 5. Book 5. First entry. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. The Emperor of Rome, commander of the legions. Struggling to get up in the morning and writing himself a note about it, which he then had to write again, because it did not fix it. There is no version of this passage that is impressive. That is exactly why it is the most valuable one in the book. The most powerful man in the world had to talk himself out of bed, in writing. Every other quote in this niche is used to make you feel that mastery is available. This one tells you the truth. He never got it. He managed it, daily, for the rest of his life. Which brings us to the thing about the book almost nobody says out loud. Number 6. Read the meditations straight through and you notice something the quote posts never mention. It is repetitive, badly repetitive. The same handful of problems over and over, for 12 books. Death, other people's rudeness, the pointlessness of fame, getting out of bed, not being ruled by his own reactions. He circles the same failures for years. Most people find that disappointing. It is the single most useful fact in the entire book. He did not learn these lessons. He maintained them, which is what a lesson actually requires. Because here is what you have been quietly assuming. That understanding is the finish line. That once a thing is properly grasped, you will not need to grasp it again. And every time you relapse, you take it as evidence that you never understood it in the first place. Marcus understood it completely. He wrote it in his own hand, in Greek, at the height of his powers. And he was still writing it 10 years later, because understanding does not hold. It leaks. It has to be topped up in writing, most nights, for life. That is the practice the book is actually demonstrating, not the content, the repetition. He was not building a philosophy. He was doing maintenance on a mind that kept drifting, exactly like yours does. One line left. And it is the one that tells you what to do with all of this. Number 7. Know where you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions, than your own soul. He was not describing a feeling he had. He was describing a place he had built, one entry at a time, on the nights he did not feel like writing. Look back at the 6. The power over your mind, written after losing it. The difficult people, written while bracing for them. The best revenge, written while wanting revenge. Death, written while burying his children. Getting out of bed, written from bed. And the repetition, written because none of it stayed. The Meditations is not a book of answers. It is a record of a man refusing to stop, on paper where nobody could see, which means the useful thing in it was never the quotes. It was the notebook, and you can have one of those tonight. So here is your challenge, and it is the same one he set himself. 7 nights, 5 minutes, paper, not a phone, 3 lines only. What did I get wrong today? What did I tell myself about it? And what will I do differently tomorrow? That is the whole format. It is roughly what the Meditations is, stripped to its structure. Then come back and comment kept. And how many of the 7 nights you managed? Most men get 4 or 5. So did he, presumably, which is why he had to keep starting again. And the whole practice assumes one thing most men cannot do. Sit alone with your own thoughts for 5 minutes without reaching for a screen to end them. That video is on your screen now. 5 Stoic reasons being alone makes you unstoppable. I'll see you there.